Thank you for being here this afternoon with us. I'm so excited to be able to moderate this panel. I'm Juanita Sunday. I am a curator, cultural producer, Afua futurist. So I'm excited to get into it with these amazing creators that we have here on this panel to talk about comics in Hollywood. These folks here have a wealth of experience, both not only in the comic book industry, but in film and television, both in front of the screen, behind the screen, actors, directors, producers, a wealth of experience. They can talk to it better than I can. So if you guys can each, starting from this end, just give a brief introduction of yourself and just a little bit of your experience before we dive into the discussion. So if you want to start.
Sure. I'm Jordan Clark. I'm a comic book writer. I have worked for DC and Image. I was part of the Milestone Initiative group. And my newest comic series, Ancestral Recall, is an Afrofuturist comic series that's out now. I also do a podcast called White People Won't Save You, which is an examination of white saviors in film. So each week we look at a different white savior film, and they reimagine it through a Black and POC lens.
I'm James III. I'm a TV and comic writer primarily. I've also done some directing and some acting. What else I want to say? I co-host a podcast called Black Men Can't Jump in Hollywood. So it's just it's similar but adjacent, you know what I'm saying? And I have comics with Dynamite right now.
My name is Kristal Adams. I am the co-owner of a publishing company called Fair Square Graphics. And we started it 6 years ago to create a space where immigrant and minority creators can create incredible graphic novels and comics and not be taken advantage of. So everybody keeps their creative rights, which is great. I've done a lot of, weird and odd stuff. I wrote for a TV show that was kind of like a documentary style, like food show called Searching for Soul Food, which is on Hulu. And I wrote, they have writers for reality TV, believe it or not. I wrote for a reality TV show that was fun that's on Netflix. I have had several podcasts. Also, one of them was called Black Card Rehab, where I would invite people to help me get my black card back. But now what I do primarily is, in addition to selling and making comics, I do stand-up comedy, and I run a monthly show called The Stigmatism Comedy, where we put stand-up comedy with it's like an author event. So we have a book of the month each month, and we give away free books. We interview the author, and it's our way of holding on to this piece of the culture that we're losing, which is reading, period.
Yes.
Yeah.
My name is Afua Richardson, and for the past 20 years, I have worked for Marvel, DC, Image, Kodansha. I worked on Black Panther: World of Wakanda, and the film was based on a lot of the things that I worked on. The book that I worked on, Black Panther: World of Wakanda, was the first. It sounds so crazy to say because it doesn't even sound right, but it is the first time Black women have written, illustrated from cover to cover a comic in the company's history. And so we won an Eisner Award for that book. I've worked on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, working on Spider-Punk. I've worked on HBO's Lovecraft Country on set with the actors, doing illustrations for a lot of the actors, and so many other things. Captain Marvel, Totally Awesome Hulk, the X-Men. I've had the opportunity to work in a lot of different genres in both comic books, film, and in music. And now I'm working on my series, which is a modern retelling of aquatic myth and legend from all over the world, Aquarius, the Book of Mer.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So each of you have moved between comics and the screen in different ways. Can you briefly talk about which medium you started in and how you transitioned into that other space? maybe we start on the other end of it.
Oh, okay. I started as a band nerd. I was a classical flautist. And in high school, I started performing with some of my friends in an all-female hip-hop group called The Anomalies. It was B-girls and MCs, and we needed graphic design. We needed flyers. Because people will judge your performance or the quality of your performance based on the quality of your graphic design.
It really does start there.
You know, so I was the only person who knew how to use a computer in Photoshop and Illustrator, but I was completely self-taught. And I started turning my friends into anime characters and making my own like comic book covers for the flyers. So I really wanted to facilitate my passions in a way that was useful so I could get better. But I really just needed graphic design. I needed illustration for my performance. So that was sort of the first merger. And a lot of times, the musicians that I kept in touch with, because I got to go on tour as a background singer and opened for Alicia Keys, John Legend, Parliament Funkadelic. I was on Soul Train. I'm dating myself. But I was on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, just a lot of different TV shows. And those musicians, the people who write music for commercials, I was the only artist they personally knew. And those people go on to writing the soundtracks for films. So recommendations were the lifeblood of my success. You know, how I worked with other people enabled me to have strong relationships when someone needed an artist. And so for Lovecraft Country, 5 people recommended me for the exact same role. So they were like, okay, we have to choose Afua because apparently there's no one else. So I'm very grateful to those folks, like Sanford Green, gave me my first X-Men job, but he was always curious as to why I was there. He's like, you look like you belong in a video. Why are you here? I was like, because I love comics. You know, but yeah. So the crossover between music, art, and film, like, what does that look like for you? Or I mean, it won't necessarily be music, but you know.
Yeah. So I guess when it comes to film versus comics, I think I probably had my most experience with film before comics.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say for you. Like you kind of went the other way because your first comic was in 2024 when you started. So you kind of, I guess, versus I think a lot of the other panelists started more in the TV film industry and then transitioned into comics.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if
comedy or entertainment, I should say, more so.
Yeah, I was mostly I started off as a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
That was primarily what I was doing in front of the camera whenever it happened, and then opportunities came from that. Like the TV experience that I had came from that. They were like, you can write for this. Maybe you can write for this other comedian that is going to be the host of this thing. So that was kind of cool. And then I like to tell people that I got bullied into writing my first comic because so what happened, it was kind of, the company happened first. My husband was like, let's do this company together. I was very excited about that because being a part of the world, I was honestly shocked at how accepted I was when I was going to conventions. I don't know what I thought. I think I thought it was going to be very one type of person and not very accepting. And I realized, it's everybody, and everybody is actually very pleasant. And it's more just it's like a farmer's market, but for comics. And so I was like, okay, I feel comfortable in this world. I want more people like me to feel comfortable in this world. And when we made our company mascot Miss Mutiny, that's when I started to be bullied because people were like, well, where's her comic? Where's her story? And I was like, we don't have one. And I got tired of disappointing people, and so I wrote my first comic really out of a sense of people pleasing. And no, I love writing it, but it's a comic that I'm very proud to say has also from beginning to end a black woman writer, black woman artist, black woman editor.
Yes.
And that I'm very proud of that. So yeah, we're in two issues now.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I started as like a fan. When I was a kid, I would like draw comics and things and scribble them in my notebook. I don't illustrate anymore. When I got into TV writing, I started as a comedian, and a lot of times, you know, they like to put you in that box of like, you do this. This is what you do. You're a sketch comedian. And we can't wait to see all the sketch comedy that you do for the rest of your life or whatever. And as a fan of comics and genre and things like that, I thought, okay, let me see if I can turn one of my scripts into a comic to have something that people can see that I do in this genre space. At the same time that I was working on that, I was trying to develop a story with somebody at Archie Comics, but for their like media for TV, and that didn't go through. But the person that I was developing with connected me with editorial over there, and so I was sort of working on my indie comics and my first Archie comic at the same time. And so those both came out in 2022. I think the Archie comic came out in 2022, and then my first thing was published under my company Rule of Three in early 2023. And so I went from film into comics in that way.
Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up with my dad working in television. He wrote for National Geographic for a while, and then he wrote for, I think, like 20 years of like America's Most Wanted. Like he was writing for John Walsh. So like I was always kind of adjacent to a lot of television stuff. I went to school for broadcast journalism and fell into like behind the scenes TV production and like video production stuff. But I'm sure, as everybody knows here on this panel, like when you're thinking of, oh, I want to make my own like movies or make my own TV show, it's like, well, that's like 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 people you got to coordinate and like get to do the same thing. And so I was like, well, I've got all these stories, maybe I can make them into comics, because it's just one other person sometimes, and like that's a lot easier to manage. All the money still comes out of your pocket, so that's something you got to figure out. But yeah, I kind of slowly made the transition, I guess, from like a TV behind the scenes adjacent world into doing more comics and just kind of figure out a way to tell those stories, because I'm a very visual person. So like a lot of the stuff that I was thinking about for TV and film had that visual nature to it, but then doing it for comics felt like a natural transition to get into.
So when you're writing for comics versus writing for television and film, is there a difference for you guys? You said it felt very natural. For anyone else, how do you visualize that, or what are the differences for you, if there are any?
It's funny, one of the first comic books cover to cover that I worked on, I had a TV and film writer team, Mark Bernardin and Adam Freeman, and Mark Bernardin, he's gone on to write so many different things, the Picard series and a bunch of horror stuff, but it was his first comic, so he was not used to writing things in a single panel. He asked for action, but he asked for more than one action in a single panel. so it was my first comic, and I had done covers and I made comics for myself, so I was a little confused. Sometimes he would ask for the character to be walking away, but tucking a gun in the front of her pants, but we see her back. And I'm like, above? Like, how am I supposed to show this? He would, she punches him out and he hits the ground, and then he looks up at her, and I'm like, which one are we showing first? So there was a little bit of an adjustment period between like, okay, apex action, you're showing a single moment, and each of the panels denotes time. So a small panel, quick action. It's like, huh? Like that's just a small box. Big panel, here is where we are. Here is the explosion. This is what you need to pay attention to most. Bigger panel. More information, more time spent soaking up information. So we had to have a dialogue back and forth about like, okay, what do you want to say here? So there was an adjustment period, but it was nice for me because then I got to trust my own vision too, like as a visual artist.
I think one of the things I heard my husband has been in the industry for almost 30 years and has a lot of great advice. And one of the things I heard him say very early on, a lot of advice he gives to people who ask is like, do the thing that you are the best at. A lot of people try to get good at all the pieces and then they end up kind of mastering none. And so I was really fortunate with this book to be able to focus on the part that I was really good at, which is, I think my thing is dialogue. I love, the thing that I love the most is I stand up, so I write for myself, I'm writing dialogue for myself. When I'm writing the other things that I wrote, I was writing dialogue for other people. And so I love story and I like figuring out weird things that fit together, but I prefer to do that part in kind of more community. Like I don't want to go off into a room and like build the world. I want to talk about the world in real time, and then the dialogue that just kind of comes out of me. Like sometimes I catch myself even watching something or reading something, I can predict what the dialogue is going to be if it's well written, because that's the thing that flows naturally to me. And the editor that I had allowed me to focus on that, so we will refine the world and answer questions about what this means for the character and their inner world or their outer world, but I got to focus on what I do best, which is dialogue, which I love. So
yeah, I'm feeling like a mix of what you both just said. I'm really trying, in terms of the differences, is like figuring out clarity of action in my panel descriptions, because it was a big challenge going from pages of dialogue to now there's a panel description breaking up pages of dialogue, every couple lines or what have you, and so trying to figure out how to be as succinct and as clear as I can be to the artists, and but another big difference that I love about writing in comics versus writing in film is being able to contribute in that way. There's a lot of dialogue around like, don't direct in your action lines if you're writing a screenplay. Don't write a cut to or a blah. No camera descriptions. But being able to kind of think about the thing that I'm writing in that way is something that I really love about working in the comic space.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting, because like you'll see a lot of people now who are coming from other mediums into comics, and they're learning through like screenplay dialogue and description, so it'll be like establishing shot, close-up shot.
Right. It's a different medium.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff does work in certain ways, but I think, I've been thinking about just a lot of like the playfulness in art, and I think a lot of the screenplay structure, because it is so structured, right? Like comic book writing and comic book art is not as structured or defined as like screenplays and movies. So like a lot of people are thinking of it as like what is physically possible to do in a camera. Or in a comic book, it's like whatever, as long as you can draw it, figure it out. And so
there's no set budget.
Yeah, there's a lot of like stiffness sometimes when people come in, because they're just like, well, I'm used to either working. Sometimes like if people are working in animation, it makes a little bit more sense just because they are used to doing things in a slightly different way. But if you're used to just like directing people or like thinking about like what do people look like in a certain situation, it's like, well, sometimes you're not even writing about people, but also sometimes you're not even like, you don't have to be as strict about it as you do in a screenplay, because a screenplay you're sending to a producer or somebody who has to say, yes, I see it. This makes sense, as opposed to like sending it to an artist who then whatever their brain is like thinking or however it's activating, like they're gonna take it from there and like really, if you're on par with your artist, you're thinking the same things. Like, it's almost like a telekinesis kind of thing. Or like,
Yeah. If I can add just two quick things, there's something very unique about comics that is unlike any other medium. it really requires the reader to be an actor.
Yeah.
They have to
Yes.
make up the voices in their
Yes.
mind. They have to fill in the gaps between the panels, and I think that's so cool. That's where film gives you. It gives you sound. It gives you atmosphere. It gives you like music. It gives you a lot of other ways to engage your senses. Where comic books require you to compose them. And I think that's really cool. It's very unique. And to your point about dialogue, one thing I love about dialogue the most is that everything that the character says lets you know more about who they are. It's not just things to be said. It's like it either moves the story forward or it lets you know what kind of person they are. And that's such a delicate art. So I appreciate good dialogue very much. But yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
I love that you said that. There's been times when I've read something and I've seen it so clearly that I'm like, wait, was that a movie? Or like, like I couldn't even remember. I was like, no, I've actually visualized that so clearly that I was like, no, that's actually something I just saw in my head. So Jordan, you said you've seen a lot of people coming from like film into the comic book space. Do you think that is because of like the popularity of how comics have been adapted into movies and films? Are you seeing it now, you think, coming the other way? And it's kind of becoming this cycle now where now folks in the film industry are becoming interested in coming backwards into the comic book industry?
It's very interesting just how a lot of things move, because as like Marvel and DC got bigger as companies, like they expanded into television divisions, film divisions, like all of these things were now like writers for some of those shows are coming in and like doing just little like quick mini-series and comics and things like that, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's more so like the learning curve of like trying to come in. Like if you're just making comics on your own, like you kind of have maybe like a couple of years where you're working out the kinks and like figuring it out, instead of like you're on the Marvel book now, like you know how to write a comic book, all right, here you go, like figure it, like train your wheels like off, and you have to like do it in real time. Because I think, you know, say he wasn't necessarily in film or television, but if anybody read Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther, like you could tell in the beginning he was like, I'm trying to figure this out because I've never done this before. And so, you know, like nobody really gave me an instruction manual. Like you can write a comic book script however you want to, you know what I mean? You can only write a screenplay one way, you know, like that's why there's the screenplay, like not only like format, but just like all of these programs that like they format the screenplay for you and you just write it out. But comic book scripts are kind of wide open in that way, so you kind of have to trial and error and figure it out. And so I think as that series went along, you're like, oh no, he's really like locking in, like he's getting it, like it's making more sense.
He had more planned for it too.
Yeah. But that's the
had
thing, like when you first start doing it, you're kind of like, huh. But now it's even working backwards now, because like Tom King, longtime comic book writer, his Supergirl story is the impetus for the Supergirl movie, and he's working on that movie. And so like you're seeing transitions back and forth now, where like even some comic book people, you know, the more that their stuff gets, you know, produced and picked up, like they're getting into that world. So, you know, hopefully all ships rise. We'll see. But yeah, I think there's certainly that crossover that's happening, and you know, it's really just a matter of like how fluid that's going to be. You know, if it's going to be something that's like a temporary, we're in the boom period, or if it's like that was interesting. That happened for like 6 years.
But also, a lot of people in the film industry are broke right now. That, I'm just gonna say, like, not to be not to be negative Nelly, but that's a lot of reason why a lot of people are turning to comics right now, is because they can quickly turn and possibly farm their IP into a comic book that is easy to carry. It's lightweight, you know. They don't have to like produce an entire like a sizzle reel of what they're doing. They can put it into a comic, and so I would say a lot of people are turning to it because of that. It's their way of turning what they're doing into IP, or maybe even entering the world. I've seen it the cynical way, where it's just like, I don't think this person is going to be here for long. They're just here, you know, just for what they want, and then they're going to go back to film as soon as whatever. And then there's some people that they do plan to stay, and they do have a genuine love for it. it's tough because we're all struggling. Like, yes, I think we all like work in both, but just because we've worked in both like film and comics does not mean that none of us came here on jets. Just letting you know.
Right.
So,
And a lot of right? And a lot of times I think comic books end up being proof of concept, where you need a lot more money to prove if a film is a viable story.
Right.
Like, does it have legs? Is it something that can be an extended series? Where it's like, okay, this, with all the distribution and paying the artists and the editors, at a max you might be paying $10,000. Good quality paper, but how much does it cost to make a film?
Right.
And then how much do you lose if it flops? So it's a lot lower investment, on the front end. But then also, if you want to turn it into something else, an animation, a film, it's a lot easier to hand someone a comic book and get them to invest in it and read it than it is, here's like 1,000 pages of a script.
Yeah.
And someone has to invest the time to read it. You can tell a story, and the best stories I've noticed, people will flip through the book and they're like, this looks good. How do you know? The images themselves are telling stories without dialogue. The motions, the actions themselves, you get emotion from single panels. And so that is something that can translate a lot easier when you're trying to sell a film, when you're trying to sell something else, if you already have a comic book. And I've seen a lot of people do that. Like, well, I don't know if I can make the film, but I thought it'd be cool to make a comic book. And I was like, you have no idea what you're stepping into. This is a beast of burden.
Yes.
You better want to make this because this is a lot harder than you think. But it's not as expensive as film.
Yeah. The only thing I think I can add to this conversation is Kristal was saying how they're lightweight. And in the early days of me trying to figure this out, I saw a panel with David Boer, and he said he would go to parties with his comic in his back pocket. You just pull it out and you can, have it there for that dialogue of trying to sell your IP or what have you. And so they're lightweight, literally. You know?
Right? Portable.
Yeah.
So talking about comics getting adapted into film or television, what do you think usually gets lost in translation, and what is the potential to be gained in that process?
Well, okay, I'm gonna speak to this only because I don't have this experience. Like, nothing that I've done has been turned into anything. But one of the things that happens very frequently, and I go to a ton of conventions all over. Right now, I think there's something that's getting lost in translation with the public.
Yeah.
And that is, many times people come to my table and they'll be like, oh my God, I love this art. I love this concept. Have you thought of turning it into a cartoon?
Yeah.
As if they're the first. Okay, and I was like, oh, you know what? Let me leave this convention right now and hop on that.
Yeah.
It's not. Obviously, I think everybody in this room understands it's a difficult thing to have happen, and also, they will walk away without buying the comic. They're like, oh, when it becomes a cartoon, it's never going to become a cartoon if you don't support it.
Right.
They literally don't understand that part.
Right.
Yeah.
They think you'll be fine.
It's just magic.
And they also think all of us have been paid to be. You don't. That's the thing that's getting lost in translation, is how something can become something.
Right.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I had an experience when Ancestral Recall first came out, and this woman came up to my table, same thing. She looked at it and she was like, "Oh, this is great! You should really if you made it into a movie,
right?
Or But then she was like, well, I just don't want you to sell yourself short. I don't want you to
sell yourself short.
You can do all these other
I'm
things.
at my highest ambition right now, man.
Okay, as if comics are the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
Here's the end of the story, because she bought the comic. She was like, oh, my husband's the comic book reader, he likes the comic. So she took it, and she went out, and then 20 minutes later she comes back and she was like, I was waiting for my husband in the car, so I read the comic. This is really good. Keep doing this.
Well, yes.
Keep doing this. You don't need to make it into another thing. And so I think that's really, a lot of people just like the exposure to a comic book, you know what I mean? Like if you haven't read it, because a lot of people, again, are coming from a Marvel, DC, you know, these really big, grand, you know, movie-going experiences. And like Afua was saying, like it's a very different experience. Like you sit down, and it's intimate, you're reading it, you're making
playful.
the story, you're doing all the stuff in your mind. And I think, you know, in terms of like the translations between the two, a lot of the times, you'll see stuff, say like a Scott Pilgrim, which is like very much adapting the language of a comic into a movie. And then you'll see stuff like, you know, I guess I'll just say, you'll see stuff like Batman versus Superman, which is like totally,
which is great, and I love it.
but like totally ignores the language of a comic book. It's just very much just like, how can we make this as like dark and gritty and like action packed as possible? Well, because it's like when you see like The Dark Knight, right? Like that is adopting the language of like Michael Bay and like making it into like a serious crime film, which I think people look at and say, well, that's cinema, right? Like, you know, shout out Scorsese, like it's that cinema, that's what it is, and I think that's what people are looking for. But I think when you do it right, like for example, people don't know that Road to Perdition is a comic book adaptation, right? Like that was a comic book first. And so people see that and they're like, wow, like that's a great movie. And it's like, did you know that was a graphic novel? Like that's what they adapted it from. And so I think that there's different ways of doing things. Every adaptation is going to lose something in translation because it's just not all of these, you know, languages are equivalent. And so you're going to have to give up something. You know, books, comics, I think give you more time with characters, give you more time with, you know, these worlds to kind of build on. A movie shouldn't be more than 2.5 hours sometimes. But even then, you only really have that time. So like, you got to cut characters, you got to get rid of things, you got to like really pare things down. And so, you know, like there's a lot of really great adaptations of comic book works, but I think they're not the comics, you know, like they're not the same thing, and like you can appreciate both, and both, you know, have their merits. But I think it's difficult in the same way that if you were to adapt a movie into a comic, like it's not going to be the same thing. There's going to be certain things that you're missing. But as long as you're taking advantages of what both mediums do the best, then I think that's how you're, you know, going about adapting it in the right way. Say something, James.
Why? We were kind of talking about this a little bit in the opening panel last night, but a thing to me that I think is lost in translation has a little bit to do with what Afua was talking about with the collaborative element of reading it. Like I think a big reason that there are such like diehard fandoms that like don't think that things are like the comics or what have you is because, you know, you're so involved in it and you are literally filling in gaps and you are just building voices and things like that. And so every single person has their own version of what is accurate, you know? And so while someone like a Zack Snyder is coming in from his, whatever he believes is right, whatever, right, but you know, because even that has some like panel things that match, blah blah blah, whatever. But and that's right to him, you know. But it's not going to be right to everybody else. And I think and I think like even just everyone kind of understanding like that what you think is right or accurate or correct is, you know, a lot of these comic characters also have like been around for 100, almost 100 years now, you know, and so it's accuracy is different to depending on what you're talking about. So.
Do you remember the first X-Men cartoon where Wolverine was Australian?
and that's my Wolverine.
Full circle moment. He is Australian. The pacing's also different too. Like a lot of people will say, well, manga can translate into, you know, anime really easily, but they have 1 million episodes.
Yeah.
You know, so each episode is paced a little differently, but like a great example, One Piece. There's so many episodes, but even in the film adaptation, the live action version, they truncated a lot, and thank goodness, because it works well when you're reading because it's a smaller page. You can kind of take your time and ingest the information. But if you're trying to ingest that on film, it's way too slow. So a lot of times things will get combined, characters will get cut because you've got to keep someone's attention for 30 minutes. And that's not the same as reading a book and ingesting that info.
So what advice would you guys give to creators who are independent creators who want to move into the TV or film industry?
Yeah.
Well,
Just be, I would say, I mean, this, I don't know if this is, anyone needs to hear this, but just be prepared to adapt.
Yeah.
It is always changing, it is always evolving, and this is not comic related specifically, but, you know, like a lot of my immediate circle, it's like verticals, why verticals? Man, I don't like, you know, or SAG is doing verticals, and I'm just like, yes, of course, like this is what this is what people are consuming. So, you know, I trying to be, I have my feelings about AI, which are negative entirely, wholly, but, you know, but just being prepared for, you know, the ever changing landscape, and it's spilling over into everything. You know, I keep thinking about how the rise of AI is going to affect all of the various Disney IP that I've gotten the great privilege to be able to write on. But, like, you know, will that exist in the same way that it exists now? You know, so just kind of being open to the evolution and seeing how you can continue to ride the wave as things come up is the advice that I would give.
my advice is do as much as you can do right now with what you know how to do. You know, we always have this grand idea of making it. Like, oh, well, when I get this and these funds and these resources
Right.
and this break, it'll happen when it happens.
Yeah.
You know, if it happens. However it happens. It might not happen the way you think. And you don't want to let yourself down or hold yourself back from making what's great, what you can do right now, because you want it to be a certain way. Well, someone's going to discover me, and discover how you can make your way through it now with what you can do now, because what you make right now, you might end up reevaluating it later, and you'll be a different version of you, and you'll be a better version of you, or you'll be a more clarified version of you later, and you'll have the opportunity to rewrite and sculpt it. It's kind of like a sculpture where you're just like, you know what, here, all right, it's out. Okay, well, you know what, I think I can communicate this a little more clearly if I do it this way, or if I can, you know, get it done that way. Like, so even if you don't have a publisher and you just have a copy machine and a pen and a paper, or you have an iPad and Procreate, you know, learn how to do the best thing you can make right now. And the relationships that you develop, you know, between other creatives, other artists, those are vital. Those are absolutely vital. Make sure you have people around you who are not only encouraging but discerning. Not people who are just like, you can't do that, well, you shouldn't do this. That's them projecting their own limitations on you. It's having people who understand your vision, and maybe they just won't. But you being firm enough but pliable enough to be flexible. Like, okay, well, I want to make this thing. I don't know how to do that. What do I know how to make? Okay, well, I'm going to make this thing. It's a lot smaller, and it's finished, and it's 3 pages, and it's mine. And then I will learn as I go. And that's, you know, you want to have this big epic saga of 180 pages. Have you made 3?
Right.
Start small. Every big book is a composition of a whole bunch of little things.
Yeah.
Whether it's a tiny film and you're just putting models and Christmas lights together in your small little iPhone movie, or you're making your hand-drawn flip book. You know, whatever you can do right now, do it. Because after you're done, you're a better artist.
I guess I would just say, adding on to that, I was talking with somebody at my table today just about like defining success for yourself versus how success is defined by like external forces.
Yes.
Because I know a lot of people who are doing things that sound really cool and they are miserable because it's not fun. Some of those things, and like where they think it's going to be fun and they get in the room and it's like, oh, okay, this is not not even what I thought it was going to be, but just like, you know, I've lost autonomy. You know what I mean? I'm in this space, and now I'm doing what other people are telling me to do, and like I get to work on the thing that I always wanted to do, but now it's not quite how I envisioned it. And so, you know, I think if if you're working in a comic space and you're like, my goal is to write Superman for 10 years, and it's like, you might not get to do that. You might not get to write Superman for 1 year, but it's also you're setting your goals as an external thing that you don't really have control over, versus like, I just want to make something that I really like and I have a good time doing it, and like I can sell it maybe, or like, you know, my friends can help me do it, or, you know, I can start a little company, and a lot of that stuff really does make a big difference, not only just in the output of it, but like when people come up and they see it and they're reacting to it and they're liking it and they're asking for more of it, you know, like that's A, something that you can control, but B, it's like if you're doing something and you hate it and it's making you a lot of money and people are like, can you do that again? And you're like, okay, I guess this is what I do now, as opposed to doing something where it's like, I really love this, and people come up and they talk to you about it and they see how much you love it and they're like, I love it too. Now that you love it, like this, you know, it's like an infectious energy. And so, you know, like everybody's been saying, like maybe you do write centers, or maybe you do like do all this other stuff. But like, even if you don't, I think it's a much better in terms of your just like mental health and like, you know, longevity in the thing, to like find your place where you're happy and you're comfortable and like still challenge yourself, still like try to reach a little bit higher and like do more, but like if your goals are, you know, these very like external things that are set by outside forces that maybe you'll get it, you know, you don't know what you'll get when you get it, but like it is there and attainable, versus like, man, you know, I've spent the last 10 years making my own indie comic and it's great. I spent the last 10 years doing like a YouTube series, and like, you know, it makes me, I don't know, like $200 a month, and I love it, and everybody loves it, and like it feels great to do. Like you'll get a lot further chasing the passions and things that you love, no matter what medium it is, than if you're just like so focused on like the one thing. Because like that thing, maybe you'll never get that thing, and like if that is what your happiness is attached to, like gonna be pretty miserable, you know, in your attempts to get it.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody's saying. It's a terrible thing to be trapped in the thing that people are most enjoy that you made. But the question that I would recommend that more people ask, that I've never been asked, is, what does your day-to-day look like? What does your week look like? Because I think I had to, many points in my life and my journey, keep adjusting how hard I was working. Like I thought that I was trained to work hard enough to get what I wanted, and then at some point I realized I need to level up how hard I'm working. I think if you can start asking people, especially at conventions, because you have the artists right there, like, what does your day to day look like? Because I want to know what level of work ethic I need to get to maybe get 1/10 of what you have right now. That's the thing that I think most people don't realize when they're asking kind of more ethereal questions, is none of that will matter if you are not able to keep up with the work of the thing that you're trying to get. So, yeah. It's a good
well said. That's great advice. So I think we have a few more minutes left. Does anyone in the audience have a question before we wrap up?
Anybody?
Can you guys speak to like the importance of these types of festivals and conventions? I'm coming from the TV and film side as well, and trying to ingratiate myself into comics and kind of learn the ins and outs. And it seems like this is like where it starts. Grassroots, the foundation for really everything. So can you guys speak to that in terms of the whole process, like where this sits?
I'll just repeat that because I'm not sure. The importance of these kind of festivals, the gentleman in the audience is in the film and television industry. And so he just asked the panelists what the importance of these kind of grassroots festivals is important to the industry.
Well, when I got started in comics, I was a musician. And to be a successful musician, or even to start to be a successful musician, I had to have a manager help me make a demo so I could get in front of an A&R, so I could have it. There were so many steps and so many gates to go through in order to just make music. This is the rare opportunity where you can have a conversation with someone who makes the thing that you want to make. And just like she said, what does your day-to-day look like? Well, last year my day-to-day looked like getting up at 5 a.m., cleaning my art space, going on a run, listening to music, letting my ideas float in before I tell myself going on a run or whatever's a bad idea. And then I come home, I eat something, and then I work. It's like creating a space where I can play and then work and make sure I take care of myself and keep myself in a place where my mind is collecting new information. And I wouldn't have even have thought of anything like that because I'm used to going to a job, going home, and when I go home, I stop working. Like working at home is like, what? You never stop working. So speaking to people who do that, and to have the opportunity to speak to people who do that, that's so rare. But then also other artists who are at the beginning of their journey, they can kind of learn from others. There are plenty of artists who they made their first comic and they're pissed off because nobody's buying it. And it's like, this is the opportunity to speak to people, to learn, to have a conversation with people, the thing that you can't do online, to connect. You might not be the best artist in the world, the best writer. That's okay. You might make something that touches someone's heart in a way that big shiny graphics do not. And understanding the value in where you are, and then saying like, hey, well, you know what? I need to level up. I need to draw more. I need to do more figure drawing. I need to draw more hands. It gives you inspiration where you can look around and learn from people firsthand. And in what industry do we have the opportunity to do that? Like, it's very rare. There are conventions for all sorts of things, video games, tech, but to be able to have a genuine conversation, this is unlike anything else that I've ever experienced. So it's vital. It's absolutely important. And those kinds of impressions that you have with people, you never know. You never know where it could end up. I used to be a bartender, and it's sort of the same thing. You see people and meet people, and there was this really sharply dressed couple that would come in every Saturday, and I'd make the same drink, and we'd have little conversations, but we wouldn't really talk very much about their lives. And they ended up being the CEO of the largest minority advertising firm in the world. And 10 years later, they recommend me for something. I had no idea. I was like, what? But the relationships, that's why these things are absolutely important, to learn, to grow, to form community. Like, there are not a lot of spaces where we have that anymore, so I'm grateful. Big shows are tough too, like C2E2. It's like 250,000 people. You do not have the opportunity to talk to people like you can here.
So I think that's actually our perfect wrap up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's a perfect way to actually end this panel, because like you said, this is the perfect time to talk to people. So while this session is over, there's still time to talk to people. The day is still going until 5 p.m. So if there's someone you want to talk to, if there's an opportunity to talk to one of the panelists, please do so. Thank you for being here. I hope that you enjoyed the session. Make sure you fill out the forms to review. It's really important to get feedback. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Can I get a video of everybody just with all of us in the video?